Feeble bunch. That wasn't the word I wanted to use. I had a much better word in my mind, but I'm sometimes out of my mind. But we're infirm. We're an infirm group, obvious by all of our prayer requests. And I'm sure you're aware of it, but if nobody has ever said it, you know, God is listening all of the time. So when we begin our prayer request, even before we begin our prayer request, our prayers are going before God. And all of that prayer request that we're making, that is in fact a part of the prayer. We actually end the prayer by having a common person leading us. Well, they're not all that common, Ellen, but one person leading us to the throne of grace and kind of enumerating again. But God's there the whole time, and God is listening the whole time. A reason that I disappear, and it's best just, you know, if what you know, then you know. You'll notice me disappearing. I actually like sitting back there so I can do it. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear Preston sing, but I had bladder cancer, been fighting it for 3 years. We're winning the fight. God is healing me. But one of the things about that is it makes it hard to stay put in any one spot for very long. Sometimes Gail does a lot of the driving, and that's because she's a very nervous woman when I drive. Anyway, Gail does a lot of the driving, and sometimes we'll just barely get in the car, and I'll say, the next chance you get, stop. And she said, but I just got started. Well, this is the way life is. You take your infirmities as they come, you take life as it comes, and you make the best of it. I am happy to be here. We're going to be here all week this week. Gail and I really want to mingle with you, so if you have something you want to do, Betty drug her off to go party hopping a week ago. I think it was flea markets they called it, but you know, when you go hopping from one place to the next. So if there's something you want to do, or something sometime you just want to come sit down and talk. We had bean soup and company one night. It wasn't planned, it just happened, but that's the way it worked out. Anyway, we're here, and this week we're going to be here all week. Most of the time we'll be here Wednesday afternoon through Sunday noon. But we do want to fellowship with you and be here, and we'll try not to change too awful much, but I'm going to be pushing all the time for you guys to get a pastor so I can get on with my retirement. That's because I'm very good at retirement. I'm finding it strangely difficult. Being pastor is making me nervous and worry, and one of the reasons I actually decided to come up here instead of down at the lectern, which disappeared. Oh, there it is. The lighting is no good down there, and my eyesight has gotten not as good as it used to be, so I get better light up here, and that will be a bonus. Maybe I'll actually read the things as they really are. Anyway, I'm glad to be here. We want to share with you. We want to fellowship with you. Every week I have more in my sermon than I'm getting to, so one of these Sundays I'm just going to have a catch-up day. It'll be all little bits and pieces of stuff I didn't get to before, and I think that one will be fun too, because it's real practical stuff. I'll get to draw pictures and all kinds of stuff on that day. You'll know when that day arrives. I'm actually probably in the middle of what a lot of preachers call a series. I did faith last week, hope this week, and it'll probably be charity or love next week. But don't let that worry you at all. My sermons are all independent, and nothing ever hooks together very well anyway. So whenever you announce ahead of time you're going to do a series, people look at their calendar and say, oh, I've got to miss the third one. I think I'll skip all of them, because they're all going to be hooked together and I want to understand it. So usually I don't tell you until I'm through, and I say, oh, did you notice that was a series? This didn't actually start out to be a series anyway. After I was working on the faith thing, I thought, well, man, you know, I need to do hope and charity because I wanted to talk about all of them. So today we're talking about hope. Blessed assurance, we have a hope is the title. I have a lot of different scriptures. Most of them are relatively short. One of them's a little longer. I may not get to that one, but anyway, we'll be looking at different places. If you want to read along, but you don't have to, because you can trust me, I'm going to read it, okay? But anyway, it's in 1 Peter, the 3rd chapter, and the 15th verse. If you're reading in the King James, it says, "Sanctify the Lord in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason for the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear." Now, I'm also going to do that in the NIV because I think it's a little easier to understand in the NIV. So it says, "In your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. This do with gentleness and respect." Big things and little teeny packages. In your hearts, set apart Christ as Lord. And a few years ago, the teenage response to that would have been, duh. Of course, we set apart Christ in our hearts. But then it's not so duh. Of all of the things that you hold in your heart and that are dear, family, memories, schools, your government, your politics, whatever, of all of the things, and you have a bucket full of things in your heart, just a lot of things that are dear and close to you. But of all of those, you need to set apart Jesus Christ, very special, aside from all the rest. That's what sanctified means. Set apart, very, very special, for one special reason: to sit on the throne of your heart. When you look at it that way, wow, that's a big order, that you're going to pick out of everything in your life that you cherish and that is dear, and you're going to make Jesus Christ the King of your heart, of your life, the Lord of everything. It's also, again, as I've mentioned 2 or 3 times, and it's the minimum. It's a tremendous thing to ask of you, and nothing less will do. You absolutely, I've been noticing lately, it's not like we're graded on A, B, C, D and special effort and then finally you fail. It's just, this is what God expects. So He tells you, and He expects you to live up to it. There's not like different gradients of where you should be with God. I know we grow in grace, but Christ needs to be Lord of our life. That's really not the message. There's always more than one message in my messages, which is why I never get them finished. Okay, the message actually started out to be, prepare to give an answer to everyone for the reason for the hope that you have. You need to be ready anytime, anywhere, at all times, whenever the opportunity arrives, to share with other people the reason that you have a hope that they might not have. Why is it that you have a hope? Why is it that you believe what you believe? Why is it that you are not down, depressed, and given up? You need to be willing and ready to share the hope that you have. And once you are willing and ready to share it, then you need to be insightful so that you do it with gentleness and respect. Because you can just aggravate the living daylights of all the people around you by sharing this glowing hope that you have all of the time. Sometimes you might even want to share that it's not so glowing. But you do need to be ready. You do need to watch for the opportunity, and then you need to have respect for other people when you're doing the sharing. But it's still the minimum. You've got to set aside Jesus Christ. You have to have this hope in your life. It really is a glowing sort of thing, and you are expected to be ready and to share it whenever that opportunity arrives. Do I still have an echo if I'm over here? I do, a little bit. Okay, I've got the echo, and there's nothing I can do about it. Years ago, I'm old, so everything's years ago, about 45 years ago, 50 years ago or something, there was a Presbyterian of all people. Can you imagine Presbyterian causing revival and hope? But there was a Presbyterian down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, who went to hold a revival for a little old preacher somewhere up around Atlanta, Georgia, whose name I'd have no idea and everybody on earth has forgotten. And so that night they were preaching, and the Presbyterian Billy Graham's Presbyterian, you know. So they expect to preach a lot and people to come in big droves. Well, the people were not coming in big droves, and there was not a lot of people getting saved, and they were talking about it. And so the old preacher said to this younger man, whose name was Kennedy, let's just go win some people for Jesus today. And it put him in shock. He says, you mean go during the daylight outside of the building and talk to people about Jesus? And he said, yeah, you can do that. And so he says, I'll show you how. So they went out, and lo and behold, they won several people to Christ. Now, being a well-educated man, Kennedy went running back home and wrote a book. That's what you do when you don't know how to do other things. You write books, okay? So he wrote a book, and it was called Kennedy Evangelism Explosion, okay? And believe it or not, out of that book, it was a system, a method of going into people's homes and sharing what Jesus Christ had done in your life and inviting them to allow Jesus Christ into their life. That's all it was. It was a very simple thing. Everybody's supposed to be ready and able to give a hope, but apparently they didn't have a system. And this thing spread across our country, and it was unbelievable. There was really a great revival that came out of what was called the Kennedy Evangelism Explosion. Everybody started with the same question, and the question was, if you were to die right now, do you know for sure that you would go to heaven? I never really liked that question, and I never really used it much myself at all. But it's an interesting question. If you were to die right now, do you know for sure that you would go to heaven? I've got to tell you a little jokes. This is where I get in trouble. Okay, this really happened. So you got this person who's trained in Kennedy evangelism, and he goes to visit somebody in ICU, and they are been knocked out. And they come back around, and he's standing there by the bed, and he says to him, do you know for sure if you'd die right now that you would go to heaven? And the guy nearly had a heart attack. He thought, man, this guy knows something I don't know, and I'm about to die right now, and I'm not really ready, you know. So sometimes it's not the most appropriate question. I usually say to people, where are you in relationship to Jesus Christ? Or how's your walk with Jesus Christ? And that makes them dig a little deeper and think a little more. So that's my question. Any question you got's good, as long as it opens up the door. But it might be good to ask that question this morning. Do you know for sure that if you would die right now, that you would go to heaven? In your own heart, do you know? For sure. If you would die, are you genuine? Do you have assurance? Blessed assurance. Do you have the hope within you that if you would die right now, you would go to heaven? Now, there's a problem with asking that question anymore. If you go down the street and you ask 100 people, without thinking, without hesitating, now they're going to say, yes. Because the theology that has pervaded in the last 5 decades or so is that everybody is going to heaven. And people have no idea who's going and who is not. I liked it really, really well 50, 60 years ago when people knew if they were saved or if they were lost. And you could ask them and they knew. And then you say, do you know for sure you're going to heaven? I had to go right down because they knew for sure they weren't going to heaven. And it was really handy whenever you could find people who knew they weren't saved, because then you could lead them to get saved. But when you approach people who already think they're saved, because they've been told everybody's going to heaven, it gets really, really, really hard. And so that's the problem with it today. How do you know for sure that you are ready and that you are going to heaven? That blessed assurance, the hope that you should have within you, that you're supposed to be ready to tell everybody else about. How do you know you got it? In the very beginning, every group of people in whatever they call their religion has some kind of an answer to that particular question. The first one that you probably encounter when you're reading the Bible, at least the ones we do in the little Bible stories and what have you, is the Jewish people had an answer for that. I'm sure that Adam had an answer for that, but we don't have a copy of the Adamic covenant, so we just have to assume some things about that. But in the Jewish religion, the way you get saved is you get born with the genetic code of Abraham. If Abraham, you were one of Abraham's sons, And thus they begin to reproduce and reproduce and reproduce. And you can chase, and that's why you read all those who begat, who begat, who begat, who cares? In the Old Testament, we don't, but they do, because if they can trace their lineage all the way back to Abraham, they're saved by their genetic code. Now, it's not true, but that's the hope that they have, is that somehow they have a genetic code that goes all the way back to Abraham, and therefore they feel very confident that they're God's chosen people and everything is all right. The Catholics, are you wet? There's the bottom line. Whether you got wet as an adult baptized, or whether you got wet when you were a little child, it's rather interesting. The little babies don't like it too much. The water's kind of cold. I saw one time. They stripped that little booger down to nothing. He didn't have no clothes on at all. Dipped his little fanny in the water, and boy, did he know. I don't know if he had a hope within him. He had a hope that he's going to get out of that cold water really, really quick. But they will worry themselves to death, and some Church of Christ denomination groups are also that concerned. They keep the baptistry bubbling all of the time, and they do warm it up. And so the whole idea is, if you get baptized, then you have an assurance and you have a hope for heaven. And you can find some scriptures that seem to justify that, but that's not it. That won't do it. You can be a wet sinner, you can be a dry sinner, you can be wet lost, you can be dry lost, but the water is just not going to do it. That's hope in the wrong place. Islam says if you can say there is one God, His name is Allah, and Muhammad is His prophet, that's all you got to do. You say that and you have assurance you're going to go to heaven. Now, you can do a lot of other stuff to get rewards when you get there, but the bottom line for them is you have to say there is one God, His name is Allah, and Muhammad is His prophet. And they say, well, that would it. That'll give you the hope. Then you know that you're okay. That won't work. That won't do it. Every religion. There was one, and I can't even remember now what it was. It was kind of the people that shave their heads and wear white or yellow robes and sit around and meditate, but in the Orient and what have you. Their way to heaven takes at least 3 years to know you got it. And the way it works is there is a whole series of mountains you have to climb, stream that you have to swim, vines that you have to swing on across valleys. I mean, it is an unbelievable physical thing. It takes 3 years of human torture to get through it. Only about 1 out of 1,000 people who decide they want to know for sure they're saved can actually get through this grommet of things that they have to do without dying. I mean, people literally die all the time trying to get through. But maybe 1 out of 1,000 they get through, and they are assured then they've done all of this, they're going to go to heaven, however, the nirvana or whatever they call it. And so that's their assurance of getting there. But the story I was watching, one guy went through it all 3 years, and when he got through, he didn't feel like he was saved. He didn't really have the hope. He didn't have the assurance. But he was almost positive that this was the way you do it. So he went through it a second time. 6 years now of going through all this torture. And you know what? He still didn't feel saved. And so he tried it a third time. He died. Never got through the third time. I mean, 1 out of 1,000 can make it once. He made it twice, but he didn't make it the third time. So the assurance was never there. It really is a very, very serious thing of knowing, I mean, really feeling good in your soul, and none of those things will work. We have something that will work, but you have to believe it on faith, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago. The hope that we have is built on the faith that we have, and so that's how it all comes together. In Christendom, it's still answered different ways. I told you the Catholic way a few minutes ago. Calvinism answers it quite differently from the way we do. The real old Calvinism said basically, you don't know. You want to have assurance? Well, sorry about that. You got to die to know. I mean, they really believed that. That was the teaching, was that before the foundations of the earth was ever begun, before anything was created, God decided this group will be saved and this group won't be saved, and we'll put them down there and kind of torture them for so many years and let them try to sift it out for themselves, but nobody will know until they die which group they're going to be in. It really caused people to try real hard. What we call the Protestant work ethic was based on this notion of I don't know that I'm saved, but there are evidences that I might be saved, and they are honesty, hard work, trustworthiness, all of the values that the works and things that we do. If I do all of those, I don't know for sure I'm saved, but I'll make everybody else think I am. That's kind of sad, but that's what it boiled down to. And some people were a little more proud of their savedness and a little more sure they thought of their savedness. But the bottom line was they truly believed you got born again after you died. When you died and breathed your last breath, then you would be born again in the Spirit, and then you would know whether or not you were among the elect that would be saved. That's not how it works. That's still not how it works. We are in the big family of people called Wesleyan. You hear me talk too much about John Wesley probably, but when I was young, we talked too much about D.S. Warner. All the preachers did, so I decided I'd talk about something even older than him. So John Wesley really is the beginning of what was called the Wesleyan Holiness Revival, which lasted about 200 years, and I got in on the very latter end of it. I don't think we're being very revived now. I think it's been over for a while. But John Wesley had a problem with this because, see, he had been raised under the Catholic domination where it says if you're saved, it's because you were baptized. And he knew he was baptized, but he didn't feel saved. And then the other preachers and people around him were saying, well, the reason you don't feel saved is because you don't know for sure if you're saved until you die. You've got to live out your whole life until you die, and then you know for sure you're saved. But there was a problem he had with that because some of his other Christian friends went around singing things like, "Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine." Actually, I don't even know if that song existed at that time. But they had what he called a peace in their heart. There's one story about he was with them on a boat, and the boat was rocking, and it was like it was going to sink, and it was unbelievable, and everybody was going mad and throwing stuff off the boat and what have you. And here was a little prayer meeting going on, and the people are just singing hymns and having a good time. And so he went up and he says, "What is going on here?" And they said, "Well, we might live or we might die. But like the 3 Hebrew children, we know that we're in God's hands and everything is good and taken care of." And he said, "Man, I really want to know about that. I want that kind of assurance that in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the difficulties of life, I can know." Kept praying for it, looking for it. And at a prayer meeting at a place called Aldersgate, he says he had a strange, warm feeling. Now, you put together his desire to live for God and do all of the things that he had learned to do through Calvinism and through the Episcopal Church or the Church of England. You put all that together, and he had quite the package. And then you put that with the assurance, and when people got those two things connected, they begin to live holy lives. And that's what spawned that 200-year revival that took place. And I'd love to tell you that from then on, John was always really happy with his assurance. But it's not quite true. If you read his literature, find out that sometimes he felt really positive and sometimes he didn't feel so positive. But one thing about it, he went around trying to tell everybody the hope is not in the works. The hope is not in the baptism. The hope is not in your genetics. The hope is in Jesus Christ. The only place that you find the hope that is absolute and for real is in Jesus Christ. And so this come together. In the Church of God, we used to have what we called, like what they called, I was before my time actually, except they beat me over the head with it a good bit. It was called salvation, sanctification, holiness, and heaven. And someday I will actually preach on that. It's called Via Salutis, the way of salvation. But the idea was step 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it got you from lost to saved, to living holy lives, to going to heaven. It became such a cornerstone of all of these people that are called Wesleyan. They still preach it and basically the same way wherever you go. It's a little different, but it's about the same thing. We were so struck on it that we had a magazine called The Gospel Trumpet, and we had it emblazoned right across there. There were the 4 pillars, to heaven, 4 pillars of salvation, of our faith, and that's how that it unfolded. Well, so all of that's history. How do we have a hope? How do we know for sure that we actually have what it takes to get us into heaven? If you should die right now, do you know for sure that you would wake up in heaven with your eyes open and seeing the angels and hear all the beauty and the singing and what have you? You might not feel like it. And that's good in a sense. I love feeling. I love to hear people sing and shout and I love to go to Black Camp meeting because they feel their hope. They really enjoy it big time. And I'm kind of one of those people, I can shout a little bit. I can get excited. I love the feeling. But it's not in the feeling. It doesn't matter if you feel it or not. It's in the faith that you have the hope. It's in the assurance of what God had to say. It's in the trust. It's in the belief in God and what He has to say. I hope you have feelings that are confirming every day of your life. But I do remember one time I went for several weeks, maybe months, without feeling much at all. And I'd had some really good feelings, and I wanted to feel good again. And I was praying without much feeling. At being young, you pray dumb things. So when you get older, you pray dumb things. But when you're older, you know how dumb the things was when you was young. You know, you don't know how dumb you are yet right now. But later on, we'll know. But anyway, so I had not had any of these uplifting, confirming feelings in a while. So I'm praying. Now, I had a particularly good altar that day. You know what a frame horn on a car is? It's the part where they used to bolt the chrome shiny bumper. So you bolted that chrome shiny bumper onto the frame horn, and it went all the way underneath the car, and you bolted another bumper on the back end of it. That was the frame, and the horn was on the front. And I worked on cars, and so I'm down there working on this car, and it's a good position for praying because it's down low, and I'm kneeling and what have you. And I'm praying, "Oh, Lord, confirm for me. Let me know for sure that you're with me." What have you? And it dawned on me all of a sudden, it is by faith, it is not by feeling. And so I said, if I never feel anything again, I'm going to claim it. That was really dumb, because us humans need some feeling from time to time, and God knew how dumb that was, so He let me have a really good feeling. And so I jumped up and danced all around that body shop because it felt so good to have God come back and say, "Yeah, Sam, you're okay, you're one of mine, and you're going, and I'm glad you finally got it, Sam, that it's not by the feeling, it's by the faith." I had to withhold the feeling till you got it through your thick skull that it wasn't the feelings that you're supposed to follow. It's supposed to be what you find in the Word. Because what the Bible says the hope is in is you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved. It is just that simple. It is not by something that you have to work on for 3 years. It is not something somebody else did when they sprinkled you or dipped you. It is not something that happened in your genetic code. You've got to believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. Faith. And as I preached a couple of weeks ago, God will give you the faith. Then you have to exercise it to make it strong and put it to use, and then you will grow in the faith. And hope, in essence, is just simply that. It is when your faith turns into actions. It's when you receive the reward of your faith. It's when you claim the promise. It's just the other end of faith. Faith, hope, and charity. It's just simply getting there with your faith to the point you can put your hands on it and say, "Yeah, it's mine." Some simple scriptures, you know them already. "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever," not some elected few, "whosoever," anybody that believes in Him shall not perish but have everlasting life. But you got to do it by believing. Believing not just in your head, believing to the point that you take Jesus Christ out of all the treasures in your life and you set Him on the throne of your heart. Believing to the place that you bow down before Him and give Him complete control. Believing to the point that everything else doesn't matter and is shut out. That's the thing that your life depends upon. That is believing in real capital letters. Not mental assent, but life-giving belief. Romans 10 and 9, could be 99. "If thou confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus Christ and believe in thine heart the Lord hath raised Him from the dead, you shall be saved." whether you feel like it or not. If you truly and genuinely believe, get down on your heart, on your knees and say, I'm giving you my life. Whatever the case may be, I'm going to depend upon you. You believe that way, you shall. And they told me when I was in grammar that shall is a much stronger word than will. So I'll take their word for it. I change the word sometimes because I like that strong shall. Even in my songs, I'll change it to shall from will because I want it to be for sure and absolute. If you believe in your heart that Jesus Christ